you, Mr. Del Bianco.
Thank you, and I'd like to thank the committee for holding an oversight hearing on whether ICANN, in its quest to launch the new top-level domains, has really stuck to its mission, and is really meeting its affirmative obligations under the affirmation of commitments. I had the chance to testify at your last ICANN oversight hearing in September of 2009, and the questions dogging that hearing were things like, was ICANN doing enough to mitigate abuse and minimize defensive registrations? A question of whether ICANN could ensure contract compliance for hundreds of new TLDs. Now, some aspects of those questions are still on the table. You've heard them today, but a lot has changed since 2009. If you remember, on the day of that hearing, we were exactly 1 week away from the expiration of the U.S. government's long-term agreement to transition ICANN to independence. Well, a week later, we had the affirmation of commitments, and I submit that is a very promising framework for global accountability of ICANN. Now, also in that 2009 hearing, the chairman, members of the committee might recall that I also brought a label maker with me to the hearing to use as a simple metaphor for what a TLD produces, these little labels that they would sell to website owners, which will help people and users to find the website. Well, since the 2009 hearing, ICANN has been listening to governments, businesses, and law enforcement concerns. So now the metaphorical label maker is way bigger and way more complicated. It's got trademark claims services. It's got rapid suspension, security standards, and community eligibility criteria. In fact, the new TLD metaphor doesn't even work anymore. It's not a label maker. It's one of those big T-shirt printing machines that you see at arcades and print shops. But it doesn't print T-shirts, it prints TLD shirts. The machine is so big that the guards in Rayburn wouldn't let me bring it into the building, but I did manage to smuggle in a T-shirt that I printed with it. And I've got it here with you. And it's got .steve on it, which is my favorite new TLD, .steve. Now, this T-shirt is a lot more than just a little white strip that comes from a label maker, because this will help people to find domains, and it helps to define the guy who's wearing the shirt, because all Steves, as you know, aspire to be as cool as Steve McQueen. So I think motorcycle.steve is going to be a very popular domain name. Okay, so now that the T-shirt maker is so big and so complex and expensive, TLD applicants, we're going to need even more funding and more technical and legal experts to run a new registry. Well, that's going to be phenomenally challenging for a TLD that's going to serve a small community, particularly a small language or script community. But the affirmation of commitments that ICANN signed says they have to serve global internet users, and that includes the 5 billion people who aren't even online yet. And most of them don't even use our Latin alphabet. Now, these people do need names and email addresses in their own scripts and languages. And I think ICANN can address this 3 ways. First, and this is on the new TLD plan, they've got to do some serious outreach all over the globe to tell businesses and organizations about the coming TLD revolution and how the next billion people are going to know how to get into the window when the applications begin. Second, ICANN's got to help smaller, less experienced applicants navigate the complex process and find affordable help for technical, financial, and legal process. Third, ICANN's got to give incentives, even discounted fees, to a TLD applicant so that they'll offer lots of versions in different languages. I mean, we've got .steve here, and that's Latin script English language. But what about a .stephanos in Greek letters? Or how about a .stivu, which is Steve in Japanese letters? Those are necessary to serve the global public interest. And if ICANN doesn't do these things, most of the new TLDs we will see a year from today are going to be Latin scripts in the English language. Then I ask you, how will ICANN claim that that is serving the global public interest as required? Now, I fear that outcome is going to play into the hands of ICANN critics at the United Nations, where China leads a group of governments, they call it the G77, but it's more like 130 countries, who are demanding that the UN, quote, solve the issue of unilateral control of critical internet resources. Translation, they want to take away the US dominance of critical internet resources like the DNS and IANA. Now, if governments lose confidence and trust in ICANN through the expansion of these new GTLDs, we could lose the multi-stakeholder private sector model of a single global internet. And ICANN's path to government confidence building is through the reps on the GAC, the Governmental Advisory Committee. ICANN has got to cultivate the GAC as a partner and ally, not as an afterthought, which brings me to another TLD shirt, only this time TLD doesn't stand for top-level domain, it stands for top-level directive. Take a look at this one. You know how they say mind the gap when you board a train in Europe? Well, this this is the t-shirt we use in San Francisco. It says, mind the gap. And I can tell you this t-shirt demands your attention too. When ICANN is evaluating a new TLD application, we should mind the gap. When you apply for a city name or a sensitive string, you've got to mind the gap. When you operate a TLD, you get who's inquiries from law enforcement, you've got to mind the GAC. And GAC has begun to find its voice. We're just not always sure what the GAC is saying. XXX is a great example. They approved it at the ICANN board meeting in March. But despite the fact that the GAC said there's no active support from the GAC for the introduction of .XXX. Well, to those of us in the business and technical community, that really sounded like passive acceptance. So there's no surprise that the ICANN board approved XXX. They might have voted the other way if the GAC had been very clear, because it's going to take a lot of time for us in the private sector and technical to understand what the GAC means. I mean, I've been married 26 years, and there's still a lot of times I have no idea what my wife really means when she says what she says. So I'll close by saying that congressional oversight is very helpful here, but I don't believe Congress should ask for specific changes to ICANN's new process, nor should Congress send one of those back-off warnings to the United Nations right now, as Chairman Goodlatte did back in 2005. In today's atmosphere, I think that would provide ammunition to governments who complain about U.S. control of critical Internet resources, and it really raises the risk of having ICANN's private sector model get displaced by the UN. And that UN is a place where every country gets one vote, but the private sector gets no votes at all. Thank you.